Hello, school students. This is our third week of online video lessons, and we are going to be learning about the desert people of Arizona this week. Last week we talked about some of the native Indian culture in Arizona, but this week we're going to focus on the desert region and the people that live there. So let's get started. The first desert people in Arizona came here before it was a desert. They followed the mammoth and other big game. Over time, they settled in the area and they learned to farm an early type of corn and other crops. The Hohokam were the first people to stay in one place in the desert region of Arizona. Until that time, people had moved from place to place in search of food. Researchers think these natives came from Mexico. They arrived around 250 BC. So BC means before Christ or before the modern calendar starting at 0. So before we start at year 0, we have years before that. And so you'll know that because I'll say BC. So the closer you get to 0, the closer you are to modern times because it goes backwards. It's not like our regular calendar where we start at 0 and work our way up. Before Christ or BC, we're going to work our way down to 0. So 250 years before the year 0 would be 250 BC. So they arrived in 250 BC and stayed in the area for about 1700 years. The United States has only been a country for little more than 200 years. And Arizona has been a state for less than 100 years. The Hohokam people were here for a long, long time. The Hohokam were the first to use irrigation systems to water their crops near the Gila and Salt rivers. Some of their canals are still used today. Because the Hohokam grew their food, they stored some of it to eat during the winter. That gave them time to learn new skills such as art and sports. The Hohokam are well known for their art. They used red dyes to paint beautiful designs on their pottery. They were also one of the first people to do etching, like an Etch-a-Sketch. The Hohokam left this area around 1450. No one knows for sure why they left, but they disappeared at about the same time as the ancient Pueblan people. Those are the people we talked about last week, and the Mogollon people. Many historians think there was a terrible drought and they left in search of water. That would make sense. It's a desert region. Others believe the soil wasn't fertile anymore, which means that you aren't able to plant seeds that grow. And that way they couldn't grow enough food for everybody if there's a drought. Others believe the soil wasn't fertile, and still others think they suffered from an epidemic or a widespread disease, or were driven out by another tribe. Some people say that the Hohokam are the ancestors of today's Pima and Tohono O'odham tribes. In fact, Hohokam is an American Indian word of the Pimas that means all used up, or those who have vanished. That makes sense. All right. So sometimes explorers come across things they didn't expect to find. Early native people in the Americas came here from North Asia by crossing a land bridge over the Bering Strait. A few years ago, some divers explored a sinkhole cave in the Caribbean and found a rare 10,000-year-old human skeleton. Talk about a surprise. Scientists say that over the years, flood waters in the cave kept the skeleton about 90% intact. Wow, that's a long time to have an intact skeleton. Scientists at the National Institute of Anthropology and History in Mexico City have studied the bones carefully. They used DNA testing to figure out all sorts of things about the skeleton. Scientists have discovered that the bones are from a woman whose ancestors or relatives probably lived in Indonesia, a country in Southeast Asia. See if you can find Indonesia on a map if you have one at home, or Google it and see if you can find it. That's a long way from the Bering Strait where scientists originally thought native people came from. So how did she migrate or travel to the Caribbean around 8,000 years ago? Is it possible that the land bridge was not the only way early humans got to American continents? That's what we have been led to think our whole lives. Could people who lived back then cross the ocean in a boat? Historians are working still on these complicated questions right now. How do you think she and her people got to the Americas? Can you think of any other way that her or her ancestors could get here not using a land bridge? All right, so let's talk about the Hohokam Desert Tribe. So say that Hohokam, Hohokam, it's a mouthful. The Hohokam were the first people of the desert to become irrigation farmers. Today, engineers are amazed at the Hohokam irrigation system. Remember, irrigation is a way for farmers to bring water to their crops if they're not in an area that has water nearby. How did their irrigation system work? Well, they used stone and wooden tools to dig canals. Canals are basically big ditches. And then they used baskets to carry the dirt away. More than 200 miles of canals have been traced to the Hohokam. Can you imagine digging that much with only these simple tools? After digging the canals, the Hohokam people built a dam across the river with dirt or rocks. When the water level of the river rose high enough, the water would flow through the canals and into their fields and farms and able to make their crops grow. The Hohokam played a ball game in courts they dug below the ground. The object was to get a leather ball through one of the rings on the sides of the court. It sounds kind of like basketball, except it was more difficult. You see, the players could only use their elbows, knees, and hips to score. Making a point was worth it though. When a team scored, the winning players got to claim jewelry or clothing that the spectators or people watching had on, if they could catch them. Wow, that's pretty cool. All right. As the Hohokam settled in one place, they started building pit houses to live in. So we talked about the Hogams last week. Now we're going to talk about apartment houses or pits. They built the homes partly below ground and used poles to frame the roof and walls. They filled the cracks with mud. This style insulated these homes against extreme hot or cold weather. The Hohokam became so good at building these pit houses that they started putting one on top of another. They called them pueblos. The four-story apartment houses at Casa Grande near Coolidge and the Pueblo Grande in East Phoenix are some of the best examples of pueblos. Grande means big and casa means house. Okay, so see if you can Google pueblos and see what they look like and see if there's any near you. So where did the Hohokam go? Well, are there any American Indian desert people who live in Arizona today? Arizona has two groups of American Indian desert tribes today, the Pimas and the Yumans. Many believe these tribes are descendants of the Hohokam. Most of the Pima tribes live in the south central part of the state. The Ikimel Oadam, or the Pima, mostly live in the Gila River and Salt River areas. This tribe was the first group of people to reclaim the land of the desert after the Hohokam. With the help of irrigation, they have become famous for their fine cotton, beans, and sunflowers. The Tohono O'odham tribes lived in the driest part of the Sonoran Desert. They were the first people Father Kino sent in 1694 near present-day Tucson. Many of the human tribes live and farm along the Colorado River. The Havasupai live in the desert neighborhood of the Grand Canyon National Park. You can only visit them by walking or riding a horse down an 8-mile trail. All right. So you guys have used an Etch-a-Sketch before, have had the toy as a child, the red Etch-a-Sketch, right? So have you ever seen etching? Do you know where the word etching comes from? Today, etching is usually done by putting acid on glass. The Hohokam natives etched by covering their base, usually a shell, in tar. The Hohokam soaked the tar-covered shell in an acid made from cactus fruit. The places that were not covered with tar were etched by the acid. That means the acid ate away those parts of the shell not covered. The result was a beautiful shell with a design etched on it. The artifacts, ancient or historical things made by humans of the Hohokam people typically have animal designs. What kind of animals would you etch on your design if you could choose? All right, let's talk about Maricopa County for a second. So we all live, or most of us live in or around Maricopa County. Can you imagine almost 4 million people living in one place? You've seen it if you've driven through Maricopa County lately. Well, not lately since no one's around right now, but before all this, Maricopa County is the fourth most populous county in the United States, not just Arizona, the whole United States. That means only 3 counties in America have more people than Maricopa County. It is the home of Phoenix, our state capital and county seat. Maricopa County is also home to more than half of the people who live in Arizona. Phoenix was named after the legend of the phoenix bird, which lived 500 years, burned in a fire, and came alive again from the ashes. The phoenix rising, right? Some people think this is a legend and is a symbol of the way this modern city rose from the ashes of the former Hohokam culture. Interesting. Kind of makes sense then when you think about it. Maricopa County was named after the Maricopa Indian American tribe. Because they were always friendly to the early settlers, the Maricopa natives had to make a treaty with the U.S. government. Maricopa County businesses are world leaders in the technology, aerospace, and healthcare industries. All right, so how long has our Sonoran Desert been a desert? Well, do you think the climate or the average weather of an area is different in different parts of the earth? Change? It does. Even our Sonoran Desert in southern Arizona changes. Just 150 years ago, there were usually 2 major rainy seasons that some historians have called monsoons. As a result of the rain, many gullies that are now just dry washes ran year-round as clear streams. Back when the Hohokam people lived in the Sonoran Desert, there was a lot more rainfall than there is now, and the rivers and streams had a lot more water and fish in them. Mesquite and other plants lived and lined the streams. There were a lot of animals that lived there due to the rich plant life. Our Sonoran Desert is definitely a much different place today than it was when the Hohokam people lived there. All right, next and the last topic we're going to talk about is the Gila Monster. Did you know that there are monsters living in Arizona? They are called Gila Monsters, pronounced actually like Gila. So actually Gila monsters aren't really monsters. They're lizards. The Gila Monster is the only poisonous lizard in the United States, and it is one of just 2 poisonous lizards in the whole world. When a Gila monster bites into something, poison from its mouth fills the holes made by its teeth as it chews its victim. Don't worry though, these monsters won't bite people unless they feel threatened, so don't threaten a Gila monster. Gila monsters are the biggest lizards in the United States. They can grow up to 2 feet long, but they average about 14 inches, so about the size of a ruler, okay? The Gila monsters have stocky orange and black bodies. Fat is stored in their tails, so they can live for months without eating a thing. They like to eat bird eggs, reptile eggs, and small animals. They like cool weather, but they bury their eggs in warm places so they'll hatch. All right, that is going to be it for our lesson today on the desert people of Arizona. This week is going to be a little different because instead of holding up questions for you, I am going to attach a link in the description of the video. So if you scroll down and see in the description of the video, there should be a link you can click on, and it's going to take you to a quick 10-question quiz. You can print it out, or you can just write down your answers on a piece of paper. You can either email me your answers, or you can just show them on a piece of paper to me Monday morning at 9:30, okay? And then not Monday morning. By the time this airs, Wednesday morning at 9:30, you can show me your answers in our Zoom meeting, okay? So remember, you're gonna scroll down below, click on the link down there. It should take you right to the quiz, okay? So I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson, and I will see you guys on Zoom soon. Bye.